How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves. I can't sing the whole thing because, they'll come for me. But we're talking about Over the Garden Wall. Now sure, this series is over a decade old, and am I shooting myself in the foot by not posting this during the fall? Absolutely. But do I care? No, because the series is still incredible. So I'm going to talk about the characters, the themes, and how the innocence of youth can still bring a tear to your eye. It's pretty good coffee. It's not related, but... The series was co-created by Katie Krentz and Patrick McHale. Krentz has helped produce a lot of beloved series, from King of the Hill and American Dad to Family Guy and Bob's Burgers, which is a personal favorite of mine.
How many toothpicks on the ground?
Don't play this game again.
Come on, look, how many toothpicks?
No, it just involves me cleaning up toothpicks.
McHale you may know from his work on both Adventure Time as well as The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. However, in the midst of working on those projects, he helmed his own project which served as the precursor to the series, which was called Tome of the Unknown. Not only was it his way of testing the art style and characters, it was also where he locked in his main voice actors, Elijah Wood, who'd play Wirt, and Colin Dean, who'd play Greg. Wood obviously needs no breakdown of his prior work. Everything is illuminated, I covered that, go watch that. But Colin Dean has mostly done voice acting roles, notably for Doki and The Loud House. The rest of the cast has some surprising weight to it, considering the fact that they get so little screen time. Fred Stoller plays the horse, Tim Curry plays Auntie Whispers, Christopher Lloyd as the woodsman, John Cleese as Adelaide, and Melanie Lynskey as Beatrice. There are also two others I want to give shoutouts to that you wouldn't really think about the first time going through the series. Beatrice's mom is played by Shirley Jones from The Partridge Family, and Frog is actually voiced by Jack Jones, who not only did acting as far back as the 50s, but who did the theme music for The Love Boat. Now, I'm going to talk about the overall themes in just a moment, but I wanted to start off by talking about some of the characters, and since I'm saving the best for last in that category, I thought we'd start off by talking about the villain. The Beast is one of my favorite villains in an animated story. Between his look, how he speaks, his creepy song, and the utter disregard for anyone else, there's something about it that just brings it all together in a perfectly creepy way. And it's helped all the more by the fact that despite how often he's spoken of by other characters, he himself doesn't even show up until episode 4. And when he does arrive, he barely speaks.
It seems you're running out of oil, woodsman. Why not let me take the lantern for a while?
He's used sparingly throughout the story, rather than a constant in-your-face threat that you often see in these kinds of stories. Beatrice is someone who starts out as an antagonist, given that she's trying to take these lost kids to a creepy witch, but once you find out that she's doing it to save her family, it brings everything else into sharp perspective. If you had a massive family and it was your fault that everyone got turned into birds, you'd be pretty desperate to fix that mistake and not worry too much about who you have to hurt in the process. But in the time she spends with the brothers, Beatrice realizes that she can't go through with it. She feels really terrible about what she did, and she braves the snowstorm just as Wirt did, just to right her wrongs. Speaking of righting wrongs, let's also take a moment to speak about the woodsman. For most people who don't read the extended material, you'll never really find out what happened prior to the woodsman obtaining the lantern. But he's told that his daughter's soul is within it and that he needs to continue to chop and grind the Edelwood trees in order to feed the lantern and keep her alive. But even he does his best to fight off the beast and point the brothers in the right direction. He ends up being absolutely devastated when he finds out where the trees actually come from.
You've been grinding up lost souls for years.
I didn't know this is where the Edelwood trees came from.
And it brings up an interesting question that the beast poses to the woodsman.
And would it have mattered? Would you have just let your daughter's spirit burn out forever?
That's a crazy question to ask a parent. Would you sacrifice other children if it meant saving your own child?
Hey, I don't give a shit about your kid.
Now we get to talk about our main characters. Wirt is the older of the pair. We find out that they're actually stepbrothers, and it's revealed that Wirt is still bitter about his mom remarrying. So even though he looks out for Greg, he's constantly feeling annoyed and embarrassed by his new younger brother. Couple that with his hormones starting to kick in during high school, and you can understand his strange and awkward demeanor. The poetry, the strange outfit, the constant self-doubt, I mean, that's real high school shit, and it's fun getting to see him overcome a lot of that anxiety and find his bravery and confidence. There's a few times in the series where Wirt accidentally solves a problem, but in the last episode, he's staring the beast in the face and stands 10 toes.
Are you ready to see true darkness?
Are you?
Don't!
And his realization that it's his fault that Greg is in danger is heartbreaking, both during the initial search as well as when he wakes up in the hospital.
Greg? Greg, what did I do? Greg! Hospital? Greg, where's Greg?
Now it's time to talk about the best character of them all.
Thank you, old lady Daniels.
Goodbye, Gregory. And please don't call me old lady.
Yes, sir, young man.
Greg is the absolute best. In a world of darkness, danger, and uncertainty, Greg remains a shining North Star to guide those around him. And that may seem like a small note, but it's his entire character. The innocence and bravery of youth. While teens and adults can learn a healthy or at times unhealthy fear of the new and unknown, the youth will never stop chasing and embracing it. As much as Greg might get them into trouble, he's also the one that helps them get out of trouble. Now, there are a lot of examples that I could give with Greg, but I wholeheartedly encourage you to watch this series for yourself to get the full scope of his character. And look, there's only 10 episodes, they're like 10 minutes a pop. You and I both know you have the time to watch this. But if I had to pick just one example, one shining thing about him, it would be his rock.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I never would have thought that a kid and his rock could have made me cry, but this series absolutely proved me wrong. Something else to glaze about the series is the opening title sequence. It shows a lot of quick cuts to various scenes, and it's meant for you to keep those in mind, since pretty much every single one of them gets revisited with greater context by the end. The circus scene being a prelude to the story about the teacher in the schoolhouse, the ghost in the hallway turning out to be Endcredit and his rival turned lover, the cat in the pumpkins, the painted wooden figures, the woman in the Hall of Bones, all of that gets touched on. But by far, the most emotional of them all has to be the rock. At the start of the series, in the midst of all the imagery, we see a rock painted with a smiley face that's taken out of a yard. At the time, it seems like the most insignificant thing to pay attention to. But Greg brings up the rock several times throughout the story, and at the end, when he's literally dying, the only thing he asks of Wirt is to return the rock to old lady Daniels, admitting that he stole the rock. Wirt, being the older of the pair and realizing that things are far too dire to worry about something as small as a rock, fails to understand how important that is to Greg.
I mean, my rock fixed rock.
What?
I stole it, Wirt. I stole it from Mrs. Daniels' garden.
No, Greg, that doesn't matter.
It does matter. You have to return it for me.
In his final moments, all Greg wanted, outside of making sure Wirt was okay, was to make sure that he righted what he saw as a wrong. So when the final scene plays, where it bookends all of the scenes we saw at the start, the very last thing we end on is Greg returning what he stole. And it got me the first time, it'll get me every single time. There are a few other things I could have spoken on, such as the relationship between Auntie Whispers and Lorna, or the tavern scene with the crazy animation style, or even the quite frankly bizarre scene where Greg goes to heaven and fights a cloud monster for some reason. But there were far larger things to discuss. If I had to pick any topics that weren't already massively dissected by other content creators and the community as a whole, the first would be this. There is always another way. It's a small yet important conversation between the woodsman and the beast that speaks to the larger point here.
There has to be another way.
No, there is only me. There is only my way.
At almost every turn in the brothers' journey, there's another path to solving the problem than they first realized. When they're being chased by the Hound in the first episode, when they face the gorilla, when meeting Lorna and Auntie Whispers. There's always an immediately obvious path, followed by one that presents itself to them shortly after. The other and more important of the topics would be regret and how you can find closure in dealing with that regret. Wirt regrets how meek and shy he often is, and also comes to regret how he's treated Greg. In facing both of those things, he saves his brother and finds his bravery. The woodsman regrets losing his daughter and having to serve the beast, but with Wirt's help, he faces the beast and defeats him and gets to be reunited with his daughter. It even echoes in smaller characters. Auntie Whispers regrets what she has to do to keep the demon inside Lorna from taking over, and after Lorna is healed, she comes clean about being afraid that Lorna will leave now that she's free. This series will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'm really glad that I decided to tackle it for the channel. So let's give it its proper honor and send it off with another round of our favorite game.
Stop the presses!
This series had Christopher Lloyd, who was in The Addams Family with Angelica Houston, who was in John Wick Chapter 3 with Asia Kate Dillon, who was in Billions with Damian Lewis, who was in Band of Brothers with Ron Livingston, who was in Office Space with John C. McGinley, who appeared in A Very Merry Muppet Christmas. If you made it to the very end, thank you so much as always. You are truly appreciated. Of course, if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments below or shoot me a message directly. I'm actually hoping to get into more animated stuff this year and try to branch out from just strictly talking about film. But in the meantime, I am always curious. What do you think?
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.